I want you to try a little mental experiment with me for a second. Right now, as you're listening to this, you are decoding this stream of noises coming out of my mouth. You aren't thinking about it. You're just doing it. But if we could crack open your skull right now and look at the machinery doing that work, what would we actually see?
That is the question, isn't it? It's the ultimate black box.
Right. Would we find a specific hardwired language chip, something totally separate from the rest of your brain that just handles grammar rules like a calculator? Or would we find a messy, tangled web that's just, intimately connected to how you see colors, how you remember faces, and how you talk to your friends?
It sounds like a philosophical question, but in the world of linguistics, this is a war. It's a turf war over the very architecture of the human mind.
And today, we are looking at the rebels. The ones who are trying to storm the castle.
We are.
We're doing a deep dive into a really comprehensive overview by Anna Siewerska, Chapter 21. It's called Functional and Cognitive Grammars. And honestly, when I first saw that title, I thought, okay, Chapter 21. This is going to be dry.
It sounds a little academic.
It does. But the deeper you get, the more you realize this is actually a story about a revolution against the establishment.
It really is. And to understand why these theories even matter, you have to understand the giant they are fighting. For the second half of the 20th century, linguistics was just dominated by one massive figure.
Noam
Chomsky.
The Godfather.
Exactly, the Godfather. And the Chomskyan view generative grammar is based on this idea of autonomy. It's the idea that language is a self-contained system. It's a sealed box. Syntax, the rules of how we build sentences. It operates independently of meaning, independently of social context, and totally independently of the rest of your cognition.
Which, to a lay person, just sounds kind of insane. It's like saying the rules of traffic have nothing to do with where the cars are trying to go.
Or who's driving them.
Or if the road is icy.
It is counterintuitive, but it's a very clean, almost mathematical way to view language. It makes it studyable.
Right.
But the source material we're covering today argues that, the box isn't sealed, it's wide open. And we're looking at two major schools of thought that say you just can't separate language from the human experience: functionalism and cognitivism.
So if Chomsky and the generative grammar folks are the status quo, these are the challengers. But they aren't exactly allies, are they?
Not historically, no. They come from different worlds, different geographies, different priorities. But what Siewerska shows in this chapter is that they are slowly realizing they might be fighting the same battle after all.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the older sibling in this family feud. Functionalism. This feels like the old world approach.
It is very European. It traces its roots all the way back to the Prague School in the 1920s.
The 20s, wow.
Yeah. You had thinkers like Willem Mathesius who were looking at language and saying, wait a minute, this isn't just a static system of signs. This is a tool.
A tool for what, specifically?
For social interaction. Mathesius had this beautiful idea that every sentence is aimed at a hearer.
It's intentional.
Totally intentional. If I speak, I'm trying to change your mind or get you to do something or, build a relationship. And the functionalists argue that the structure of language, the grammar itself, it evolves specifically to handle those jobs.
So form follows function. The hammer looks like a hammer because it needs to hit a nail.
Exactly.
And language looks the way it does because we need to talk to each other.
Precisely. If you study linguistics in, say, Amsterdam, London, or Germany, this is likely the water you swim in. It's all very sociological.
Okay, so that's the European social focus school. Then we have the other contender, cognitivism.
The West Coast wave.
Right.
This emerged much later, in the 1980s, and it is distinctly North American, specifically Californian. You've got figures like George Lakoff at Berkeley and Ronald Langacker down in San Diego.
Why does it feel so appropriate that the mind-body connection theory of language comes from California?
It fits the vibe perfectly, doesn't it? So while the functionalists were looking at society, the cognitivists were looking inward. They were reacting against that Chomskyan idea that grammar is a separate module. They argued that language is just one part of general human cognition.
So using language is the same kind of process as using memory or attention or visual processing.
Exactly. They believe you can't explain why we say the cat is on the mat without understanding how the human eye scans a room, how we perceive spatial relationships, and how we focus attention.
So we have the sociologists versus the psychologists, basically.
That's a great way to put it.
And they both agree that the math nerds, the Chomskyans, are wrong about the box being sealed.
That is the battlefield. The source material refers to this as the debate over self-containedness. The Chomskyians say syntax is self-contained. It doesn't care if you're happy, sad, or pointing at a blue dog. The functionalists and cognitivists say language leaks. It's porous. You cannot explain the grammar without the context.
Okay, let's drill down into the functionalists first. See, Wierska throws a lot of acronyms at us in this chapter. It's a bit of an alphabet soup. SFG, FG, RRG.
It looks like a government agency list.
It really does.
Yeah.
Help us parse this. If I'm a listener, what's the one I actually need to know?
The big one is SFG, Systemic Functional Grammar. And this is associated with Michael Halliday.
Halliday. I feel like I've heard that name in relation to literary analysis.
Yes, exactly, because SFG is fantastic for analyzing texts. Halliday wasn't trying to map neurons. He was trying to map social situations. He believed that when you speak, you are making choices from a massive menu of meanings.
A menu. I like that analogy.
Think of it like a restaurant.
Well,
You enter a social situation, say you're buying a coffee. That situation limits your menu. You aren't going to order a philosophical debate about the nature of existence.
probably not, no.
You're going to select from the service encounter section of the menu. And Halliday broke this down into 3 key variables: field, tenor, and mode.
Okay, break those down for me.
So field is what's happening, the activity. In this case, buying coffee. Tenor is the relationship. Is the barista your best friend or a complete stranger?
Right, that changes things.
It changes your grammar. You might use more polite markers, fewer slang terms. And mode is the channel. Are you speaking face-to-face or are you texting your order in an app?
So SFG is top-down.
Yeah.
You start with the social context, the vibe of the room, and that dictates the words you're allowed to use.
Exactly. It's brilliant for understanding why we speak differently in a courtroom versus a pub,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really tell you what's happening inside the brain.
Right, it kind of treats the brain as a bit of a black box. It just cares about the social output.
It does.
So what are the other functionalist theories? The ones with the clunkier names, like role and reference grammar?
RRG. This is where we get into the Indiana Jones side of linguistics.
I'm listening.
So Chomsky and a lot of the establishment built their theories mostly by looking at English, maybe a little French or German.
English is weird.
It's a very weird language. We don't like to admit that, but it is. It's an outlier in many ways. So the founders of RRG people, like Van Valen, they were out there studying indigenous languages. Dhirubal in Australia, Lakota in North America, Tagalog. They realized that the so-called universal rules Chomsky proposed didn't work for these languages.
So they needed a theory that was actually universal.
Right. They are obsessed with typology, comparing all the different language types, and their approach is bottom-up. They don't start with social vibes. They start with the verb, the predicate, and build the sentence out from there, making sure the rules hold up whether you're in New York or Papua New Guinea.
But here's the critique I noticed in the reading. Siwerska points out that even though these functional theories claim to be about how humans communicate, they might be getting the psychology wrong.
This is the sting in the tail, yeah. Critics like Jan Newts, who is cited heavily in the chapter, argue that functionalists are still too obsessed with words. They treat concepts as if they are just linguistic labels.
There's a great example of this in the text, the commercial event.
Yes. This really clarifies the problem. Imagine you walk into a store and you buy a shirt. In your mind, that is one single unified event. Money changes hands. Shirt changes hands. It's one scene.
Right. I don't have a separate brain movie for buying and another one for selling. It's just the transaction.
Exactly. But in language, we have to pick a side. I can say, I bought the shirt, or he sold the shirt, or the shirt cost $20, or I paid him.
4 different sentences, but one mental image.
Precisely. And the critique is that functional grammars tend to treat buy and sell as totally different predicates, different items in the database, but cognitively, deep in the brain, they are just different camera angles on the same scene. Functionalism struggles to capture that shared conceptual reality because they are so focused on the words being spoken.
And that is the perfect segue to our Californian friends, the cognitivists.
Yeah.
Because conceptual reality is their entire brand.
It is. Cognitive linguistics emerged specifically to fix that disconnect. They want to open the black box of the mind. And unlike the functionalists, who have all these different factions, the cognitivists are pretty unified on one big idea. Syntax and semantics are the same thing.
That's a heavy statement. Syntax, the rules, is the same as semantics, the meaning. That sounds like saying the blueprint of the house is the same thing as the furniture inside it.
For them, it is. They view it as a continuum. There is no separate grammar module that just processes rules. There is just a massive inventory of symbols. And the key unit of currency here is the construction.
Siorska highlights this as the unifying concept, so define a construction for us.
A construction is basically a form-meaning pair. It can be simple, like the word apple, that's a sound paired with an image, but it can also be complex and abstract.
The example in the text was, "A dozen roses Nina sent her mother."
A lovely sentence. Now, a traditional linguist would parse that using a tree diagram of nouns and verbs, but a cognitive linguist sees that sentence as a stack of constructions. You have the words roses, Nina, those are constructions. But you also have the ditransitive construction.
Which is that pattern of X sent Y to Z.
Right. And that abstract pattern has meaning in itself. It implies transfer. Even if I used nonsense words like, I griebed him the bop, you know I transferred a bop to him because the pattern tells you that.
So the pattern itself carries meaning, independent of the words you plug into it.
Exactly. And then in that roses sentence, you also have the topalization construction moving a dozen roses to the front. That pattern means, hey, look at this, I'm emphasizing this.
So learning a language isn't about memorizing a dictionary and then learning a separate rule book. It's just learning thousands and thousands of these constructions, from single words to complex sentence templates.
Correct. It's all stored in the same big filing cabinet in your brain. And within this camp, you have some truly radical ideas. We have to talk about radical construction grammar.
That's William Croft. I love that he put radical in the name.
No subtlety there.
He didn't want to be subtle.
He really didn't. Croft looks at the diversity of the world's languages and says, you know what? Universal categories don't exist.
Wait, no universal categories. So a noun isn't a noun everywhere. A subject isn't a subject.
He argues that no, they aren't. He says you can't assume the subject in English is the same cognitive thing as the subject in Japanese or Swahili. He says there is only a subject of an intransitive verb in English. It's hyperspecific.
That blows my mind a little. It seems so inefficient.
But it's respectful of the data. He's saying don't force European categories onto other languages. It's the ultimate bottom-up approach.
Now, despite these differences, whether you're looking at visuals with Langacker or radical diversity with Croft, all the cognitive models share a theory about how we learn these constructions. And this leads us to the usage-based model. To me, this felt like the most practical takeaway for our listeners.
It is the most rapidly growing idea in linguistics right now. The usage-based model says that grammar isn't a crystal that you're born with. It's a muscle. It's based on frequency and entrenchment.
Entrenchment, like digging a ditch.
Exactly. Imagine a grassy field. Every time you hear a sentence pattern, like, can I have, it's like walking a path through that grass. The first time, the grass barely bends. But if you hear it 10,000 times, that path becomes a dirt road, then a highway. That is entrenchment.
So grammar is just habit.
Deeply ingrained neural habit.
Right.
We don't have a rule book. We have probability statistics. Your brain is constantly calculating what comes next based on everything you've ever heard.
This explains why language changes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If people start saying on accident instead of by accident, and I hear it enough, my brain eventually paves that road.
Exactly. The error becomes the rule because the frequency shifted.
Okay, so we have these two camps, the functionalists, the Europeans, looking at social menus, and the cognitivists, the Californians, looking at mental pathways. Siorska's chapter is a comparative overview, so who wins? How do they stack up?
Well, she draws a really sharp contrast between process and inventory.
Okay, break down that distinction.
Functional grammars are process-oriented. They view language as a problem-solving activity. You have a goal, I need to borrow money, and you have to navigate social obstacles to build a sentence that works. It's dynamic. It happens in real time.
Like improv jazz. You're reacting to the other players.
Yes. Whereas cognitive grammars are inventory-based. They see language as this vast static network of stored constructions. When you speak, you're just pulling the right book off the shelf.
And the criticism is that the inventory model is too static.
Right. Knights argues that communication is messy. It's fast. We adapt mid-sentence. If I start a sentence and realize you look confused, I change the structure halfway through. Simply looking up a static construction doesn't explain that flexibility. Functionalists are much better at capturing that messy, dynamic reality.
But on the flip side, the functionalists are weak on the actual brain science.
Correct. They describe the social interaction perfectly, but they can't tell you how the neurons are firing to make it happen. Cognitivists use concepts like metaphor and image schemas to actually explain the mental architecture.
Although Sawierska notes that the cognitivists get heat for being too introspective.
That's the classic scientific burn. Did you run an experiment or did you just sit in your armchair and think about it really hard?
Right.
And cognitive linguistics has historically relied a lot on intuition. This sentence feels right to me. They're trying to get more empirical, but it's a valid critique.
So we have two imperfect heroes. One understands the society, one understands the mind. The mission of this deep dive was to see if they can merge. So, is a merger happening?
Sawierska suggests it is inevitable, but currently it's a bit of a one-way street.
Hope so.
Functionalists are becoming more cognitive. You have new theories like functional discourse grammar that explicitly try to include cognitive structures. They realize they can't ignore the brain anymore.
But the cognitivists aren't becoming functionalists.
Not as much. I think once you decide that language is fundamentally a mental phenomenon, it's hard to get excited about social tenure again. But the reality is the cognitivists need the functionalists. If you study the brain in a jar, ignoring that it evolved to talk to other brains, your theory will always be incomplete.
So the future is a hybrid, a theory that acknowledges we are social animals, but that we're filtering that social world through a very specific type of cognitive machinery.
That's the dream, the functional cognitive consensus. The walls of the Chomskyan sealed box have been smashed from both sides. Now, the people who smashed them are standing in the rubble looking at each other and realizing they need to team up to build something new.
I want to circle back to the usage-based model before we wrap up, because this has been sticking with me.
It's the concept that usually lingers.
If our grammar, our actual neural wiring, is determined by the frequency of what we hear, I have to ask, what is the internet doing to us?
That is a profound question, and it's one linguists are just starting to panic about.
I mean, think about it. For 200,000 years, humans heard full sentences, face-to-face, with tone and gesture. Now, we consume fragmented text, headlines, memes, 280-character bursts, 2x speed audio.
And algorithms that prioritize catchy, truncated fragments over complex discourse.
Exactly. If entrenchment relies on repetition, are we physically rewriting the grammatical networks of the next generation?
It's very possible. The constructions that are becoming most entrenched today are fundamentally different from 50 years ago. We might be watching the evolution of a new, more fragmented cognitive architecture in real time. We aren't just changing how we write. We might be changing how we think.
On that slightly terrifying note, we're going to leave you to mull over the architecture of your own thoughts.
Pay attention to what you're feeding your brain.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.